In the mid-2000s, the long-reigning titans of the NBA's Western Conference showed some vulnerability. The Eastern Conference team best positioned to dethrone them was, without question, the New Jersey Nets. The Nets had been swept by the Lakers in the 2002 NBA Finals, but they'd retooled, fought their way back into another Finals, and come pretty damn close to taking down the San Antonio Spurs. If Dikembe Mutombo hadn't been dealing with injuries, and if they hadn't blown a lead in Game 6 of the series, this 2003 trophy might have belonged to the Nets. But after falling short, all the back-to-back Eastern Conference champs had to do was hold the core together, try again to improve the roster around the margins, and take another crack at winning it all in 04 and beyond. That would mean keeping all-star Jason Kidd happy and supplementing this core of Kenyon Martin, Richard Jefferson, Kerry Kittles, and six-man Lucius Harris. That would ideally mean adding a big man to supplant Mutombo, the major acquisition whose struggles forced the less experienced Jason Collins into big minutes against Tim Duncan and David Robinson. In Rod Thorne and Byron Scott, the Nets had an award-winning executive and battle-tested head coach up for the task. There was a juicy opportunity for the Eastern Conference to reassert itself, and the Nets had a head start on leading that charge. But over the next 5 years, New Jersey would make major leadership changes and major roster changes, fail to reach even the Eastern Conference Finals, then blow the whole thing to pieces and eventually leave the damn state. The Nets had a great thing going. They just needed one last little push. So what the hell happened? The first thing you need to know about the Nets in 2003 is that even though they just made back-to-back finals, they were feeling very stingy. The team was for sale, with several rich folks bidding. Rich guy Bruce Ratner wanted to buy the team and move them to Brooklyn. Rich guys John Corzine and Charles Kushner, father of a kid named Jared, would keep them in Jersey if they had the winning bid. But in the meantime, the Nets were so tight with money that in the second round of the 2003 draft, they picked future All-Star Kyle Korver, then immediately sold him to the Sixers for cash. They used that cash to cover summer league costs and buy a copy machine. What? Copy machines are expensive. There was at least one realm in which the Nets absolutely could not be thrifty. Superstar point guard Jason Kidd was a free agent, and it would take a max contract to reel him back for another finals run. Even that might not have been enough. Kidd strongly considered signing with the San Antonio Spurs, the team that just beat New Jersey in the finals. And there was some chatter that he was disgruntled in New Jersey. Kidd denied rumors that he wanted coach Byron Scott fired, but it was notable that assistant coach Eddie Jordan, who was a key voice on those finals teams and very close to Kidd, left to become head coach of the Washington Wizards. Kidd met with the Spurs in July, and when he left San Antonio, all parties were convinced that Kidd would become Tim Duncan's co-star for the foreseeable future. But Kidd got cold feet on the plane home, and in a decision he'd later admit to regretting, changed his mind and accepted a 6-year, $103 million deal to stay in net. A key motivator for Kidd, the Nets seemed to have filled their hole in the middle. It had been a problem for a few years. Todd McCullough couldn't hang with Shaq in the 2002 finals, so New Jersey traded him with Keith Van Horn for veteran all-star Dikembe Mutombo. But Mutombo had a nagging wrist injury, chafed against Scott's coaching, and ultimately didn't spin much in the playoffs. That left the center position to the younger and completely overmatched Jason Collins. If the Nets were going to win it all on the third try, they'd have to improve in the middle, and their solution was another veteran star, Mutombo's old college teammate, Alonzo Mourning. Mourning had missed much of the prior couple seasons because of kidney disease, but his 4-year deal with the Nets helped convince Kidd to stick around. And Mourning looked healthy in training camp, so the ever-thrifty Nets ditched the man he was meant to replace. Dikembe Mutombo was waived just a year after New Jersey traded for him. The new net wasn't pleased with the cost cutting, and things would only get worse for Mourning. New Jersey opened the season with a losing record, Mourning wasn't playing great, and his teammates struck him as too carefree about the whole situation. Mourning criticized power forward Kenyon Martin for missing time with an ankle injury, which wasn't particularly cool, and Martin fired back by mocking Mourning's kidney disease, which was definitely deeply uncool. The two had to be separated before things got physical, and one was left to wonder how New Jersey's front court was going to hold up, but that wondering went out the window pretty quickly. Days after the altercation, Mourning retired from the NBA because complications with his illness necessitated a kidney transplant. This might be a relevant time to mention that the Nets had their center of the future locked up. They drafted young Serbian big dude Nenad Kristic in 2002. And Kristic wanted to cross the ocean and start his NBA career, but his pro team in Serbia absolutely would not let him out of his contract. So, Jason Collins time. Again. Back to their old lineup, the Nets didn't exactly right the ship. They hung around 500 through the new year, and by the end of January 2004, it was time for some changes. The team finally agreed to sell to Ratner, who intended to move them to Brooklyn once he, raised a neighborhood and built an arena there as part of a bazillion-dollar boondoggle. And in a sudden, if not totally surprising move, Byron Scott found out he wouldn't be joining the team in their eventual relocation. The Nets' 22-20 record was good enough to lead the garbage-ass Atlantic Division, and despite the rumors, Kidd was on the record saying he wanted Scott to get an extension. But on January 26th, Scott was fired. Assistant coach Lawrence Frank was promoted to interim head coach. Firing your coach mid-season usually doesn't bode well, but something weird happened. Frank's Nets reeled off 13 straight wins, a record for a rookie head coach that still hasn't been touched, unless you count Luke Walton's stint as Warriors' substitute teacher. And the Nets weren't squeaking by opponents. Almost all the wins in that streak were by 10 or more points. That incredible February helped propel the Nets to a respectable 47-35 record, enough to hold off rookie Dwayne Wade and the Miami Heat for the Atlantic Division title. That made the Nets the 2 seed in the playoffs once again and drew them a first-round matchup against the Knicks, who they'd destroy in a series sweep that's only notable because Collins sent New York's Tim Thomas to the hospital, which for some reason started a prolonged beef between Thomas and Kenyon Martin. That set the Nets up for an Eastern Conference semifinal against the Detroit Pistons, the same team they swept to reach the finals in 2003. It was a little dicier in 2004. The Nets scored just 56 points in Game 1, then got blown out again in Game 2, only to rally and enter Game 5 tied 2-2 with Detroit. And in the middle of a truly dogshit series, Game 5 was one of the wildest games in NBA playoff history. The Nets had the win in hand, but missed free throws down the stretch, then watched Detroit's Chauncey Billups bank in a 40-footer to send it to overtime. The game lasted 3 overtimes and 8 total players fouled out, leaving benchwarmer Brian Scalabrine to play the role of hero with a career-high 17 points, including this huge 3 down the stretch of the third OT. The Nets headed home up 3-2, looking to seal the series. But no. Rip Hamilton lost Kidd to bury a huge last-minute shot, helping the Pistons snatch Game 6. And then, back in Detroit, the Pistons rolled. Kidd was dealing with a sore knee and tossed up a bagel in a blowout Game 7 loss. The West would finally fall with the dysfunctional Lakers in the 2004 finals, but it would be the breakthrough Pistons sending the Shaq and Kobe tandem to their doom. The would-be vengeful Nets were left to just sit at home and watch. At the beginning of July, Ratner's purchase of the team was officially approved. GM Rod Thorne kinda waffled when asked if Ratner had commanded him to cut payroll, but his actions told the tale. The Nets traded their 2004 first-round pick to the Blazers for Eddie Gill, who they cut, and $3 million in cash. It's a lot of copy machines. Kidd got surgery on that messed up knee, and while recovering, he watched his supporting cast dissolve. Martin was a free agent, and the Nets didn't even make him a real offer. They let him go to the Nuggets in a sign and trade for a bunch of draft picks. Thorne readily admitted he was hurting the chances of a once finals caliber roster. And a couple weeks later, he sent Kerry Kittles to the Clippers for basically nothing. So there went the starting power forward and shooting guard, and six-man Lucius Harris just got straight up cut. Their replacements were absolute ass. New Jersey gave out little contracts to the likes of Ron Mercer, Eric Williams, Rodney Buford, and Jacques Vaughn, who would play some point guard until Kidd recovered. There was some good news for Nets fans in the summer of 2004. Kristic was finally ready to come over from Serbia. Alonzo Mourning had recovered enough to unretire and play out the rest of his contract. And with all that money they saved, the Nets signed Jefferson to a 6-year, $78 million deal, so at least one of Kidd's sidekicks would still be around. But about that. Kidd was grouchy enough about his depleted supporting cast that the Nets were considering payroll-friendly trades to unload him. But a trade didn't materialize. It's tough to trade a dude recovering from knee surgery. Frank's severely weakened roster started the season losing and kept losing once Kidd returned in December. the trade rumors kicked back into gear as the Nets stood at the precipice of a full-on tank. But later that month, there came a twist. The Toronto Raptors and superstar Vince Carter were very done with one another, and the Raps desperate to move on. Even the stingy Ratner couldn't resist the opportunity and encouraged Thorne and company to change course a bit and make a deal to help the team immediately. A couple draft picks and a few players, mourning chief among them, for Vince Carter. Suddenly, the Nets had a competitive core again. Kid couldn't really complain anymore. Forget tanking, time for another playoff run. So what if the big man situation is back to Jason Collins and the rookie Kristich? So what if Jefferson messed up his wrist in late January after colliding with Chauncey Billups? Damn it, Chauncey! Let's scrap to get back above 500 and add veteran Cliff Robinson before the trade deadline to make a playoff push and rally and win the final game of the year to just sneak into the playoffs. And holy shit, when did Dwayne Wade get so good? And when did he make friends with Shaq and Alonzo? The Heat swept the Nets with ease. Now what? The Nets were rebuilding, but since they'd kept Kidd and added Carter, the Nets had to keep pushing for wins. That summer, New Jersey swung a sign-and-trade deal for a new starting power forward, Sharif Abdur-Rahim, their headline acquisition of the 2005 offseason. But it turned out his knees weren't so hot, and Sharif failed his physical. The Nets failed to renegotiate terms with Abdur-Rahim and rescinded the deal. They quickly pivoted to acquire the taller but underwhelming Mark, that's Mark with a C, Jackson, because they were running out of time to use their trade exception. Even though their big move fell through, the Nets improved, though they remained oddly thrifty, ditching Jackson at the trade deadline to get back under the luxury tax. Bummer, because he maybe could have been useful come playoff time in another matchup with Shaq, this time in the Eastern Conference semifinals. And especially after Cliff Robinson failed a drug test and got suspended in the middle of a damn playoff series. The Nets actually dominated Game 1 in Miami, but took a dump for the rest of the series while the Heat rolled all the way to Wade's first championship. But hey, they had a playoff squad widely projected to challenge for the East crown in 06-07. They just needed to stick together, find yet another new big man, and stay healthy. Oh no. Kristich tore his ACL in December 06 and needed surgery. Jefferson's ankle got messed up and also needed surgery. The Nets slipped into the playoffs and even upset Carter's old team in the first round, but this kid's team was getting pretty good too. LeBron James dominated the Eastern Conference semifinals, and the Cavs rolled from there en route to LeBron's first of many NBA finals. Game 6 of that series would be the last NBA playoff game ever played in New Jersey because the Nets soon realized their ship had sailed and it was time to get younger. In 07-08, the Nets started iffy, bottomed out for real on a West Coast trip in January, then commenced the pulling of the plug. They dealt Collins to the Grizzlies, then Kidd to the Mavericks, where he would finally go on to win a ring. Then they finished emptying out by trading Jefferson in 08 and Carter in 09 while declining to match an offer sheet for Kristich. Ratner sold the team to Russian bajillionaire Mikhail Prokhorov, who sat through some unbelievably hard seasons and watched Thorne resign before the team finally completed the move to the new Barclays Center in Brooklyn, where Billy King would be their next GM and things would get funky all over again. So what happened to these Nets? Well, after falling short in back-to-back finals, they squandered the best opportunity to go all the way. New ownership pulled that team apart, then kinda pivoted back toward competing, only to run into bad luck, injuries, and some new blood in the Eastern Conference. When the Nets were great, they were truly great, but they hit their peak too early. The Eastern Conference finally snatched back some championship trophies in the mid-2000s, but by the time that window opened, the once elite Nets had already begun their collapse. Thanks for watching episode 2 of Collapse. If you want to check out episode 1, it's right here. It's about football. If you'd rather learn more about how those Lakers unraveled, check out this episode of Rewinder.